Welcome to the council meeting at East Gippsland Shire Council on the 16th of August 2022. East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public. During the meeting, any members of the public who are addressing the council will have their images and comments recorded. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the chair. In line with the Local Government Act 2020, councillors are able to attend the council meeting electronically or in person, and the meetings will be open to the public via live streaming. Members of the public are invited to view the live stream council meeting by following the link on the council's website or Facebook page. If we encounter any technical difficulties tonight with the live streaming during the meeting, we will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If technical issues cannot be resolved, the meeting may be postponed. So, good evening everyone. I'd like to acknowledge the Gunai, Kurnai, Monero and Bidawal people as the traditional custodians of this land and waters that encompasses East Gippsland Shire and their enduring relationship with country. The traditional custodians have cared and nurtured East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council value their living culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland, their elders past, present and future. Excuse me just a moment, councillors. Are there any apologies? I don't think so tonight. We've got everyone here. Terrific, thank you. So, councillors and guests and those viewing online, a member's attendance can only be recorded as present at the council meeting when the member can confirm they meet all of these three criteria. They can hear proceedings, they can see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members, and they can be heard to speak. So we have two councillors, Councillor Greason and Councillor Buckley, attending remotely at the moment, and I will confirm with each councillor in turn that they can see, hear and be heard by each other, and to note assurance from each that the location they are participating from is secure to ensure confidential deliberations remain confidential. Councillor Greason, can you see and hear us?
See and hear you.
Terrific. We can't quite hear you, so I wonder if you just might lean into the microphone a bit better. Can you confirm that the location you're participating from is secure to ensure confidential items are dealt with in a confidential manner?
Yes, it is secure.
Terrific. Got you. Councillor Buckley, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Mayor.
Thank you. Can you confirm the location you're participating from is secure to ensure confidential items are dealt with in a confidential manner?
Yes, I can.
Thank you for that, councillors and everyone. I'm just going to ask for if there are any declarations of conflict of interest.
Yes, I need to declare one, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Greason. Just note what item it is that you're declaring a conflict at.
So it's item 5.2.1. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll note that. Are there any other declarations, councillors or officers? None noted. Confirmation of the minutes that we had on the council meeting on the 26th of July be confirmed. I need someone to confirm that for me, please. Councillor Crook, Councillor Uri. Councillor Crook, did you want to speak to the minutes?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Is the motion opposed, councillors? Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote that all those in favour. Thank you. It's carried. The minutes are a true and accurate record. Thank you. The next meeting of the council is Tuesday the 6th of September to be held in the Corporate Centre, 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale at 1:30pm. 1:30pm. Just confirming that it's an afternoon meeting, CEO?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Terrific. Are there any requests for leave of absence?
None have been received.
Terrific, thank you. Councillors, item 1.7, just want to note that there's a potential motion, a condolence motion, and I'm wondering if someone would like to move that, please.
Yes, I'll
Councillor
move it. Thanks,
Allen,
Mayor.
somebody like to second it? Councillor Van Diggle. Councillor Allen, Deputy Mayor, would you like to speak to this, please?
Thank you, Mayor. In moving this condolence motion for past Councillor and Mayor Harvey Bates, who died at Southport, Queensland last month. Harvey grew up as a child in Lakes Entrance before moving to Melbourne as a young man to start a career in customs in 1954. He quickly moved through the ranks and as a 36-year-old received an MBE for his contribution to the Commonwealth Public Servants and the Commonwealth Public Service and the Customs Service. He was appointed Chief of the newly formed Commonwealth Drug Enforcement Authority, and that was a position that he held for many years. He later worked in conjunction with the United Nations and the FBI long after his retirement on drug enforcement policies. On his retirement to Lakes Entrance, Harvey was instrumental in establishing the East Gippsland Sports Academy and was its inaugural chair. He was also on the board of Gippsland Lakes, or Lakes Entrance Community Health as it was, now Gippsland Lakes Community Health, and responsible for establishing its risk management policies. He was chair of the organising committee for the Australian Firefighting Championships that were held in Lakes Entrance in 2022. About that time, along with Adrian Layla, Harvey investigated the sale of the Palmers Road property in Lakes Entrance. Between them, they took the issue to the Supreme Court, which resulted in the property remaining in council hands, as it does to this day. This prompted Harvey to stand for council, where he was successfully elected and subsequently served as mayor in 2003-4. After completing his time on council, he moved back to Melbourne for a while, continuing his consulting both in Australia and overseas, before finally shifting back to Bairnsdale, where he suffered a serious trauma and was moved to Southport to be near his family in Southport while in care. He was a very committed contributor to his community throughout his life, and he made a great contribution to the East Gippsland Shire and to our community. In proposing this motion, I pass on my sincere condolences to Marion and his daughters and to Harvey's surviving siblings. Councillors, I commend this motion to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and we note, Deputy Mayor, that you attended the service and spoke at that eulogy as well, so
Yes.
We're very grateful for that. Councillor Van Diggle?
I don't have many things to add. I think I stole Trevor's thunder potentially by seconding the motion, but I think it's really important that we acknowledge him here today in this space, and you've read it out really well, what he's contributed to both to East Gippsland and more broadly. So very lucky that he was part of our area, part of our region. Not sure if you want to add something.
Thank you, Councillor Van Diggle. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak to the condolence motion here? Councillor Uri, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was elected to council in 2005 when Councillor Harvey Bates was still on council, and although I only served for 1 year with Councillor Bates, I have to say that he was very well respected around the council table. He was very diligent in his work, and his contribution and work as a councillor was very much appreciated, not just by councillors but by the officers and the community. So I'm very happy to support the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Uri. Good words. Would anybody else like to speak to the condolence motion? Councillor Zini had the pleasure of meeting Harvey on a couple of occasions, and I found him a very astute and assiduous person and very interested in the goings-on of local government, and was very keen to interrogate me on what was happening in council, and I really appreciated that. He was a very honourable person. Councillors, we're just going to move this, that council conveys its condolences to the family, friends and past colleagues of former Mayor and Councillor, the late Harvey Bates MBE, who recently passed away. Councillors, all those in favour? Thanks very much. That's passed unanimously. Councillors, and our thoughts are with the former Mayor's family, obviously, and Harvey sat around this very table. Councillors, I'm just going to move on to open forum, and our open forum tonight, I'm going to acknowledge two young leaders in our midst here, Benjamin Reynolds and Cedric Taylor. Benjamin is from Gippsland Grammar, and he is the campus school captain, and he's looking very well decorated over there, I must say. And Cedric Taylor is from St Mary's Primary School, and they are both junior Rotarians, and I'm going to present them with a lapel pin, and you're going to greet them with rapturous applause. So Cedric and Benjamin, our job is to make tonight's council meeting very interesting, so you aspire to government at some stage in the future, because we need diligent young leaders like you in the future. Well done. Councillors, we're moving on to item 1.8.1, petitions, and we have a couple there. So there's Peter over there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. So the report before you at 1.81.1 is titled Cann River and Noorinbee Storm Water Drain. It's and the report is informing Council of a petition that has been submitted by Ms Avril Simons from Cann River seeking issues relating to stormwater drainage be addressed. And the petition states, we the undersigned hereby petition East Gippsland Shire Council to work with the state road authorities to ensure there is adequate and maintained drainage of storm water from private residences and public spaces. The petition has been received, Mayor, and presented in accordance with the Governance Rule 7.7. And there is a recommendation before you,
There is indeed.
Councillors. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr Cannizzaro. Councillors, any questions of Mr Cannizzaro on this matter? So there's a recommendation there, councillors. Do I have a motion? Councillor Van Diggle, thank you. Oh, sorry, you were scratching your head, were you? Happy to move it. Councillor Stowe. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Van Diggle?
No, I'm guessing we're just accepting the petition.
So I think so. We're receiving it and so
So
on.
thanks again for putting in the effort to, I mean, we've received a lot of petitions lately, so it's
Great, thank you. Councillor Stowe.
Yeah, seems like a fair and reasonable request and a good response.
Thank you. Is the motion opposed, councillors? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillors. Carried unanimously. The second petition we have is Paynesville Library and Service Centre Service Review, 1.8.1.2. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. So this report informs Council of a petition submitted by Mr Bernard Mooney from Friends of Paynesville Library Inc, seeking Council to reconsider cutting operating hours at the Paynesville Library. The petition states, we ask East Gippsland Shire Council to reconsider their proposed plan to cut the hours of opening to the Paynesville Library by 18.5 hours per week. Mayor, the petition has been received and presented in accordance with Governance Rule 7.7, and there is a set of recommendations before you, Councillors.
Mr Cannizzaro, thank you. Councillors, are there any questions? Clarification? Yes, Councillor Van Diggle.
it's probably more for the people in the audience, but are these people who've sent this petition the same as the last petition we've received, or are they all new names?
Thank you, Councillor Van Diggle. We haven't cross-checked it against other petitions. There may well be some similar names, but we have not done that. We accept the petition as presented.
Very good, thank you, Councillor Van Diggle. Councillor Buckley.
Yes, just clarification, more for community information, just in regards to the signing of petitions, because there was an issue around a petition recently that there were 800 signatures, but only a certain amount were accepted.
Councillor Buckley, I'll just ask your question to this particular item.
The question is, to this particular item, it's a question to Mr Cannizzaro. What do the community need to know in regards to the signing of petitions as regards to their, to make sure that their signature is accepted or their application on the petition is accepted?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Buckley. I think very simply, the submission form needs to state what the petition's about. There needs to be a date at which point in time the individual will place their name on the submission form. Also, the name needs to be presented, the address, so, 1 Smith Street suburb, and a signature and some commentary if they so choose to make a comment.
Are postcodes also mandatory?
Postcodes depends on what the submitter will do, Councillor Buckley. So sometimes we see an address and no suburb, but they put a postcode in. Sometimes we don't see an address and they put a postcode in. Sometimes they put an address in with no postcode. So it depends on the individual and how they interpret it. But an address is an address. So if you're asked for an address, you provide the address.
Thank you very much, Mr Cannizzaro.
Are there any further questions, councillors? So, councillors, there's a recommendation there. Have a motion. Thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Van Diggle. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, only just to say that I think the Friends of the Library, both in Paynesville and in Lakes Entrance in particular, have been very active, and I thank them for engaging in the consultation process.
Great, thank you. Councillor Van Diggle. Is the motion opposed, councillors? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Thanks, councillors. In which case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Great, thank you. Carried unanimously. I don't think there are any questions of council tonight, CEO.
There are no questions and no public submissions, Mayor.
Terrific. We can move on to notices of motion, which is item 2.1, 2022 State Environment Report. Councillor Crook.
Yes,
Thanks
thank
for
you,
bringing
Mr
this to
Mayor.
the table.
I would actually like to table an alternate motion, if possible.
Yep, I think so. Let's have a look at it, Councillor Crook.
My motion is that Council acknowledges the findings of the recent State of the Environment report released on the 19th of July by the Minister for the Environment and Water, and 2, writes to the Honourable Tanya Plibersek, MP, Federal Minister for the Environment and Water, and also to the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio, State Minister for Solar Homes, Energy, Environment and Climate Action. Firstly, to A, advocate for the implementation of programs designed to reverse the environmental declines identified in the State of the Environment report released on the 19th of July, in recognition that a healthy environment ultimately underpins our health, well-being and economic prosperity, and B, requests that the federal and state government provide adequate resources to the East Gippsland Shire Council to ensure that matters of national and state environmental significance within our municipality can be appropriately managed.
Thanks, Councillor Crook, for moving that motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Uri. Thanks, Councillor Greason. You were pipped at the post. Must be the lag from South Australia. Thank you. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, certainly, Mr Mayor. The State of the Environment report was released about a month ago now. It's the federal government's most comprehensive assessment of our nation's environment to date. I won't profess to have read the entire thing. It runs to well in excess of 1,000 pages, but the summary documents I have read are pretty clear. And they're pretty clear that our environment as a whole is in a state of decline. Its condition is declining. We've got more threatened species than we've ever had. Our ecosystems are struggling in many cases. Feral animals are running rampant. You get the picture. But at a council level, our environment and sustainability strategy articulates our community's desire and our organisation's commitment to have an environment that is healthy and well managed. But the recent State of the Environment report unfortunately shows that this really isn't to be the case. So I guess I'm moving this motion tonight because I feel we have responsibilities and commitments to care for our local environment, but we don't necessarily have the funding required to do that. So we're privileged enough in East Gippsland to have both matters of state and national environmental significance on council-managed land, but we don't necessarily have the resources to do our part in caring for them. So I'm asking that we write to those ministers with the responsibilities for those jurisdictions to help us look after those things for the benefit and the health of our communities and our environment.
Thanks, Councillor Crook. The seconder has an opportunity. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very happy to speak in support of Councillor Cook's notice of motion. The reason why I think this is particularly pertinent to this council and to our community is that the State of the Environment report relates to our own community vision. And the community vision that this council adopted is the closest thing we have to what we think is important, the community values in East Gippsland. Pardon me. In that community vision, it's quite explicit that the environment is very important to our citizens. When I read, and again I haven't read the full report either, but when I read the summary and some of the commentary about this State of the Environment report, the most recent one, the picture is that our environment is bad and getting worse. The major threats to our environment are habitat destruction and land clearing for agriculture, mining, logging, transport and urban spread, invasive species, fire, climate change and pollution. It's quite evident that the Federal Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act is failing to protect our environment. Council has picked up that sense of value, those values that our community has told us about, and we articulate those through our council plan, through our environmental sustainability plan, and also through our advocacy strategy. And I'm pleased about that because that gives us the strategic backing to go ahead and to write to the ministers about our position. I do agree with Councillor Crook that our council receives very little support in relation to these matters, and I think we should be advocating for much greater support from both state and federal government. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Uri. Sorry, we're just on a technical governance matter over here that I've thrown the cat amongst the pigeons, but that's all right. Nothing to do with what you're saying. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Buckley, then Councillor Greason, then Councillor Allen. Go ahead, Sonia.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I will support the motion. However, I'd like the community to know, as I always champion world best management practices for the environment. However, I'm a little bit concerned about Councillor Crook's written rationale on this because I'm concerned about grandstanding on climate change, which is fast becoming the new political religion. And I think it's very important that we understand that logging and agriculture are important sectors and sustain humanity and are the bedrock of our region. So we have to, yes, have, we're all in agreement that we can revise how we manage these areas, but we should be very clear that we should support those sectors and not let, the climate change, overwhelm community and policy making so that we can't, look after our communities as well as our economy, as well as our environment. So even though I support this motion, I caution councillors on how we approach the issue.
Councillor Buckley, I was just about to call you on a point of order. It was unnecessary to make a comment about grandstanding about a councillor. So I'll just give a warning to all councillors that when you're talking to an item, you speak to the item and don't make commentary about individuals. Thank you. Councillor Greason.
Thank you very much. Look, I'm just very quickly going to speak in support of this motion. I believe it is relevant to everything we do as a council for East Gippsland. And I'll quote from their report. Our health, living standards, cultural and spiritual fulfilment and connection to country are all inextricably linked to our environment. I I would be really impressed if the federal and state governments agreed to fund us to manage the issues that are relevant to us that have been identified in the report. But it is really, really important to ask. Thank you.
Councillor Greason. Councillor Allen.
I will support this motion while not necessarily buying into the doom and gloom that the report contains, and only draw your attention to the recent findings of James Cook University in relation to the Great Barrier Reef and skewed findings that have been pretty widely condemned around the world. However, that's just an observation. But it seems to me that governments, both state and federal, like to bring in legislation, regulation, and then leave it for local government to fund it. And my view is that whatever the responsibilities that the federal government push onto local councils as a result of this report, they need to fund us to adequately deal with those issues and not leave it to ratepayers to again pick up the bill for what should be a federal responsibility. Thank you.
Councillor Allen, thank you. Any further comments, councillors? Thanks. My only echoing of Councillor Allen's comments around leaving local government to pick up and to cost shift onto the hard work that inevitably seems to happen. So thanks very much for those comments, councillors. Councillor Crook, nobody spoke against you, so there is no right of reply in this situation. Councillor Grayson, you've still got your hand up, so I'll just point that out. I know we're happy to have you waving. Councillors, so I'm going to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillor. That's carried unanimously. Councillor Crook, thanks for bringing that to the table. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Councillors, there's no deferred business, so I'm going to move on to councillors and delegates' reports. And I'm happy to move around to my left to Councillor Crook.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of attending the Eagle Point Scout Hut the other night, and there were quite a few scouts, probably 50 scouts. Councillor Stowe and Van Diggle came with me. We had it explained to us how much they value use of the Eagle Point Flora and Fauna Reserve there. And it was an educative experience. I didn't realise that they had such an affinity with the place that seems to go back quite some time. So it was quite enjoyable. We sort of mused about the possible future uses of the facility and its adequacy to provide for their needs, whether it was suitable or not, or whether it should be there or not. They're in the process of applying for some grant money for some other fairly small-scale infrastructure, some tables and some lighting and such. So that was a good experience, and I wish them every success. I hope that we can negotiate an outcome with them that suits their needs and ours, bearing in mind that it is an area set aside for environmental values, but there can probably, I would think, be some kind of human use component there as well, as long as it's well managed. So I certainly enjoyed that. I've spent quite a bit of time speaking to the community about our timber industry position policy over the last week or so. It seems to be a matter of interest for quite a lot of people. And I guess I'd just like to reiterate, we will be discussing it later tonight, clearly, but I'd just like to reiterate that we in this policy, we're not trying to provide all the answers to the world's problems. We're trying to strike a balance between forest users, and I think that we've done a good job in doing that. So while we might not keep everybody happy, I think we're trying to represent the broad cross-section of interests in our community that seek to use the forest for a variety of interests. So I might just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Crook. Councillor White.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. Was present at the last Agricultural Consultative Committee meeting, and the question of rates was formed part of the agenda for that meeting, and I can say that the ag sector are eagerly awaiting how much commitment Council puts to making the rates system for the next year a much fairer package across the board, and that certainly did spark some interest. And I also had the pleasure of while I was in and then attended a Lindenow Fire Brigade luncheon and get together a couple of Sundays ago where they were trying to attract new members. It's very difficult to get people to make a commitment into these volunteer groups, but it was very pleasing, although there were many medals handed out on that day by the permanent members of the CFA. But it was really, really nice for a lifetime friend of mine to be awarded 55 years of service to the CFA, which is an incredible commitment. He originally began in the brigade that I'm in Fernbank, then moved to Lindenow and became a member of the Lindenow Brigade. So he's served for 55 years over 2 brigades, and also on the same day, his 2 sons, one being the captain of the Lindenow Brigade and the other, I think, first lieutenant, both were awarded medals for years of service as well. So it was really good, and congratulations to all the other members of the brigade who received medals that day, and thanks to I think there was Fernbank and Hillside, but anyway, the other brigades came along in their little red trucks to support them on their day. So it was really great to catch up with all these people, and again, congratulations to Andy Bruce for 55 years of service.
Great, thanks Councillor White. I was hoping that you would mention that person's name, and we absolutely acknowledge that sort of service and volunteerism is a noble thing, absolutely. Councillor Greeson, do you have anything you'd like to share?
It's very complex. Now I have to... yes, I do. Sorry, I've been away, but I did attend 2 things in the week before I went away that really impressed me. The first one on the 27th of July was a celebration and recognition event as big manufacturer productivity improvement program. So it was terrific, recognising the work of ASBIG supporting businesses in East Gippsland to review and refine their operations systems. And they were given 5 2-hour sessions over 3 months, and with major dollar benefits obtained from freeing up time and reducing expenditure, etc. So 11 organisations presented the changes they made to their work processes and systems, and improvements in efficiencies, productivity, worker satisfaction and safety, and money saved. And those companies were A1 Solar, Gippsland Jersey, Gippsland Seed Services, Kennedy Trailers, Pell's Haulage, Riviera Joinery, Sandbar Motel, Beach, Jared, someone whose name I didn't catch, and I apologise to you, Jared, Wood Street Windows, and ZCG Scalar. But it was a great event. And the other thing I attended was a webinar called Electrify Everything with Saul Griffith. And this was held on behalf of the Lord Mayor Nuatali Nelms of Newcastle, who's the chair of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. Saul's an Australian with lots of American qualifications and extraordinary experience in the States. But he's written 2 books, one called Rewiring Australia and The Big Switch. And he makes it all seem very simple and very practical. And he talks about the pathway to climate success is to replace the main origins of our emissions, which are gas and oil-powered machines, with cleanly powered machines as they retire. Our water heaters do that over 10 years. Our space heaters do it over 15 years. Our gas cookers and other kitchen utensil equipment over 12 years, and petrol diesel cars over 20 years as the choices get increase and there's more supply and more second-hand vehicles. So that was really informative and just made it all seem very logical and very practical. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Greeson. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, look, it's been a busy time. my normal appointments, Timber Towns, which I'll speak to our paper later on in the meeting. I'll save it for there. I attended the Agricultural Committee, meeting, which also raises the issues around biosecurity and the concerns in regards to the foot and mouth potential biosecurity problems that our agricultural sector is concerned about at present. And there's a lot of information circulating in the agricultural sector. And I've been working with the CEO and local members of my community to ensure that that all the information sessions are well attended, and that we've also had a really good briefing on that. So let's hope we don't have to mitigate that issue. Also, I have been working very diligently with Rural Councils Victoria in regards to our up-and-coming state election asks. I've contributed to the emergency management sector and incorporated the recent MAB motion of strategic partnerships to further send home the importance of local government and local communities being consulted in a meaningful and involved way in the development and implementation of a multidisciplinary and decentralised approach for natural resource management, and to support local management of natural resources in coastal and mountain areas, because I think it's critical to engage local communities and councils right across the state to ensure that our natural resources that we're prepared, well managed, and we make sure that we mitigate instead of and prevent instead of having to react when these problems arise. So that's my report, Mayor.
Very good. Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Van Deel.
Thank you. I have attended a few things. I'm surprised no one's mentioned the Bass Coast visit yet, so I'm hoping someone is... saved it for me. I'm going to... I don't have much written about it, but I found... So we went to the Bass Coast a few weeks ago with most of the councillors to learn about coastal erosion, I guess the impact of climate change on coastal communities. And for me, it's really interesting because unfortunately, I'm not the most environmentally aware person. So being on council, I've learnt a lot through fellow councillors, but it was really interesting to see, especially with the tours that we did and the images of how that coastal erosion and how that's changed. I'm assuming in East Gippsland it's not quite as extreme as it was in Bass Coast, but I think we share really similar experiences. So for me, that was a really interesting trip and really educational, and it gave me a bit of an insight into what we can expect over the next few years in terms of changes to our coastal environment. I also attended the John Noble Quartet at the St. John Baptist Church, which was a partnership with Crescendo and John Noble, and it was an opportunity for young people who play string instruments to perform. So I think there was young people from Traralgon through to Bairnsdale, but there was another group of young people, and I can't remember where they were from, so I do apologise. But obviously a quartet is usually 4 instruments, but this time it was the 4 mentors and young people playing together. And I had a chance to live in Vienna for a while, so I grew quite fond of classical music, and it was nice to see young people, probably around the age of 13, I would say they were about 13, playing amazingly. So it was really nice to be there, but there wasn't that many people there, unfortunately. So I recommended in the future we get a bigger venue and encourage more people to attend. And then just the one last thing I would cover off on is that I went to the Bairnsdale CFA last week. I had a chance to meet with the captain. His name is Captain Crackers. I'm not sure what his real name is. I'm sure it's...
Alan Cracknell.
Alan Cracknell. Yeah, sometimes I don't know people by their real names. And Crackers.
You didn't make that up, did you?
No, I didn't make that up. No. And one of our youth ambassadors, Jag, is actually also a CFA volunteer. So I had the chance to meet with both of them there. And they showed me through the facility, which is absolutely humongous, and, you know, told me about the processes that they go through when there is a fire and how they prepare. We went into a room and they gave me pamphlets and started talking about fire readiness. And we're not talking about bushfires, we're talking about like house fires, for example. And I would say that I've paid attention in the past when I've been told about these things, and I was absolutely not fire ready at all. So I took heaps of his pamphlets so I can educate myself on how to make sure that I am prepared for a fire if there was one in my house. But then he actually took me in the fire truck and we did some laps of town, and we went through my street and he started informing me of those poles that are in place with the white and the blue that says where the hoses go. I'm sure there's a technical term.
A hydrant, maybe?
What?
A hydrant?
I don't think so. Is that what they're
A
called?
ball valve, so you can
That's
screw
it.
a hydrant in?
Yeah, so I didn't learn too much apparently, but it was a
very
busy
good.
trip. I was learning a lot, but I hadn't...
Don't cover them up.
Pardon?
Don't cover them up.
Well, he did say, that person's covered them up in your street, that person's covered up in your street, and I was like, oh, I'll probably talk to them. But I never knew that that's what they were for. So it was a quite interesting experience for me, and also they've asked councillors if we'd be happy to come and have a tour of the new site. They opened last year, and I acknowledge that we could probably do that for every CFA in East Gippsland, but and I've asked him if he could invite a couple of councillors to future meetings as well. So they're my updates.
Very good. Thanks, Councillor Van Deel. And I believe that there is an official opening of the CFA at Bairnsdale on the 3rd of September. 3rd of September. So put that in your diaries as a placeholder.
Have we been invited?
Yes.
No.
Did you acknowledge it?
Councillor Stowe, what have you been up to?
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for asking. Look, as councillors, we're privileged to be invited to various functions, and I was privileged to go with Councillor Uri and the Mayor to the Colorado State University Singers recently. Now, this follows on the heels of the Colorado Children's Choir and SOS, which, of course, as you would all know, is the great ABBA. So we went along to the theatre. It was brought to us by Robert and Jenny Latimer once again. It's a free concert and it was very well attended. I must say, these are semi-professionals, these guys, and they are very impressive. Even to a mug like me that knows nothing about singing, you could see that they did know something about it. So it was very good. Happy to go to any more of these, Councillor Uri, if you happen to get any free tickets. The other thing of interest, though, is the Rail Freight Alliance. Now, Councillor Arthur and I went down to Melbourne to represent our shire there, and the alliance, as most of you would know, is made up of the councils of Victoria, and they lobby government and other people to try and get upgrades to the railway lines, like perhaps passenger services to Mildura, to get problems fixed up. Now, there's a few problems. We've got the intermodal opening up in Bairnsdale fairly shortly. Gippsland, I think, from memory, provide 27% of the freight to Melbourne, which is quite a significant percentage, and there's issues in there with the tracks in and also the port of Melbourne, and perhaps the intermodal will end up at Hastings, who knows. But I'd encourage you all to read the very comprehensive report that the Deputy Mayor has written on this issue. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Stowe, thank you. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very happy to submit my written report for inclusion with the minutes, but I just wanted to mention a couple of things which haven't been spoken about before. On the 10th of August, I attended the Rural Agency Network Support Meeting, which is a very well-run meeting and well supported by our Council Officer, Kayleen Wickham, who is able to give a good update on relevant news from Council. But also we heard from some very interesting updates from Red Cross, Rural Financial Counselling Service, Gippsland Community Legal Service, Anglicare Victoria and others. So it's a multi-agency meeting and it's a really good networking and connection opportunity to talk about what services and programs are being rolled out for our rural communities, in particular, but not exclusively to farmers. And I can say there's a lot happening in that space, but the need is also very great too. So it's a really worthwhile meeting to attend. And also I attended the online public consultant consultation for our arts and creativity strategy, which council is currently developing. The online meeting was, there wasn't a huge attendance, but I think the quality of those people who attended was fantastic. It's a really good conversation about what people see as an ideal sort of set of circumstances for the arts to flourish in East Gippsland. So I think it's a very positive consultation process led by our consultant, whose name is Leith Thomas. He runs a very good meeting. So looking forward to the next steps in that process. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillor Allen, what have you been doing?
Thank you, Mark. I'll take us back to Thursday the 28th of July to the citizenship ceremony at Lakes, which was
pretty good, wasn't it?
It was an excellent day, and, you know, John mentioned before about getting people to commit. These were people from all over the world that were committing to Australia, and so pleased to be able to do it. And it was a really uplifting, excellent day. Kirsten has mentioned Bass Coast, and I just add to that it was a really well worthwhile exercise, not only with what we saw about erosion and that, but building networks with the fellow councillors down there. It was a well worthwhile visit. On the 4th of April, as I said before in the condolence motion, I attended the memorial for Harvey Bates and spoke on behalf of his contribution to East Gippsland, which was an honour to be able to do that. Last Thursday in Sale attended the Seats conference, and the main object of that meeting was to set a strategy for the state council, a state election from the councils that make up seats. So that's in the process of being formulated now.
Just remind us of that acronym again for those unfamiliar.
South East Australian Transport Strategy.
Thank you. Excellent.
Which takes in shires from Shoalhaven through to Bass Coast.
Great.
And then the next day, in company of Councillor Stowe, as he reported, we attended the Rail Fate Alliance. And in between that, which I nearly forgot, on Thursday night, I attended the Leader Town meeting. I think Cosette and Janine Louise were there. There was about 60 people in attendance, and I think it was a really well-run, worthwhile meeting. So thanks to Leader for organising that. And on Saturday, I briefly attended the cultural and creativity consultation at the Iceworks until there was an almighty clap of thunder and I had to race home and attend to my quivering dog, or he wouldn't have been there when I got there. So, that's my report.
Busy times. Thanks, councillors. Councillors, my report I will submit. I just wanted to note and recognise the work done by our colleagues at Bass Coast Shire, Councillor Michael Whelan and CEO Ali Wasty and the team, and what great hosts they were for us. And it was really terrific, wasn't it, to actually be able to mix with another group of councillors. And sometimes just a problem shared is a problem halved. And to mix with other councils and know that they're dealing with some of the challenges and to share some of those issues and opportunities that created. But I want to dwell in particular, Councillor Stowe, you mentioned the Fullerton Singers, but this was particularly special, and you mentioned Robert and Jenny Latimer, and we should acknowledge their contribution for the work they did to bring the Fullerton Singers from California State University, councillors and those listening. So they donated their time. Now, the Northern Hemisphere summer, so it was their summer vacation, and they donated their time to come to Australia. And this had been delayed a bit, but it was a tour, an uplifting tour, in recognition of the challenges that we had been through the Black Summer fires. And the great irony was that our friends, our new friends from California, at home, their families were dealing with summer fires in Yosemite and the great oak fire that was happening there. There's a tremendous irony about those amazing young people who sang to us. Their concert was called A Stone of Hope, and A Stone of Hope is a really a great metaphor because stones are hard, but they're also enduring. And their tour was hard work for them, but they left an enduring mark on us, I think. Wouldn't you say, Mendy and Trevor? It was really fantastic. And the president of California State University, and I just want to make a point, that this is a really amazing and socially just state university, and 60% of the 41,000 students are the first time in their family to attend a university, which is just astonishing, really amazing. So the president of California State University, Fullerton campus, Framrose Vergi, presented me a beautiful medallion, which I would like to pass on to you, CEO, and ask if you could ensure that this remains like a stone of hope and enduring memory for us in our council chamber or in our council, so that we remember the work done by those people. It was really a beautiful night, and it was very uplifting. So I'm going to pass this to you now. Thank you. Thank you for all your work, councillors. It's important that you are out there in the community. Let's move on to officers' reports and the business of tonight. And young leaders, thank you for being here and being so patient. Benjamin and Cedric, bye-bye. We get about. Thank you, Nicole. So 5.1.1, councillors, is the Audit and Risk Committee biannual report, January to June 22, and the revised Audit and Risk Committee Charter. CEO, thank you. Take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, the report before you, the Audit and Risk Committee biannual report, January to June 2022, and the revised Audit and Risk Committee Charter are presented to you for your consideration. The Audit and Risk Committee is a very important committee of Council. It brings external skills and oversight to many of the Council activities, and they have been reviewed in this biannual or twice yearly report, which is required under the Local Government Act. The committee reviewed a wide range of reports from management, along with the internal and external audits as per its work program. And I would encourage people to have a look at the highlights in that report that demonstrate the breadth of things that that committee has actually reviewed over the 6-month period of this report. The other matter as part of this report tonight is in relation to a revised charter. The charter effectively outlines the way in which the committee will operate and its terms of reference, if you like. That was originally adopted in August 2020. It has now been a couple of years since then. And so there's a better understanding of the principles of the Act, so they have been reflected in the Charter. And several council policies have also been amended to include additional responsibilities for the committee that weren't currently reflected in the Charter. It is also noted that the committee's annual performance and that the role and responsibilities of the committee could be refined. So the committee themselves said that we want to have a look at this Charter and make sure that it is actually providing the best possible service back to the council. As such, the committee reviewed the Charter. The proposed changes to the Charter are a refinement to the purpose. The policy context has been updated. Clarification on roles and authority of the committee. Membership clauses have been reviewed. There's also been an inclusion of a number of other things. I won't run through all of those, but again, they're outlined in the report. And so there's been a few changes, and attached tonight is both the clean and marked up, changed version of the Charter so that you can see the difference. There's also been a section removed in regards to the annual reports in relation to the public space closed circuit television and drone programs, which is no longer required. At the committee meeting of the 25th of July, the committee endorsed the revised charter to be presented to council for adoption, and it is, as such, presented for your consideration tonight, Mayor.
Very good, CEO. Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor White.
Thank you. This is to the CEO. We had the most unfortunate episode earlier in the year where there was no chair due to Jason retiring from a position, and then we had a what I think is a most unfortunate incident where there was conjecture about who should chair the meeting, and unfortunately that resulted in the resignation of what I thought was a very good member of that committee. So is there anything in here that would negate a repeat of that event, in that people had no context of whom should be in charge while there was no chair?
Through you, Mayor.
Yep, okay.
And I may call on Mr Cannizzaro to also add something here. Councillor, thank you for the question. The particular meeting in which you're referring was not actually an Audit and Risk Committee meeting. It was a meeting to look at the Charter, in fact. So it wasn't one of the formal Audit and Risk Committee meetings. Without going into detail, it was never confirmed actually the specific reasons why that member determined that they no longer wish to be a member of the committee. However, what I would say is we actually have a full set of independent members now who are providing excellent feedback and I guess commentary on the material that's presented to them, providing advice and guidance back to the officers, which has been very well received. The Charter does, in fact, outline how, if a member of the committee is perhaps not performing or behaving in a manner that is consistent with our policies, in particular the Code of Conduct, then there are mechanisms within the Charter which have been clarified to ensure that the membership and council can take the appropriate action if required. I don't know if Mr Cannizzaro wishes to add anything further to that.
No, nothing further from me, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
So just a follow-up question then, because this is an extremely important committee, because you know, they can dig deep into what's been going on in council, etc. And I would just like to be reassured that it is totally transparent. These are independent members, and you know, we need full transparency in you know, in how that committee operates and the work they do.
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. So the Audit and Risk Committee is in fact in place to ensure that there is that transparency, that there is the accountability in relation to many of the requirements under the Act and under the Local Government Act and other acts, in fact. They are also presented and have a role in both our internal audit process as well as our external audit. So the external auditor is on there. There are 4 independent members. There are 3 council members. And then there is also our internal auditor and our external auditor attend those meetings, and we provide them with a range of information which they look at. And I have to say the agendas are fairly big and chunky in terms of into the hundreds of pages at each of those meetings. And they can also ask for information as well, should they believe that there is something that they want to have a closer look at, and of which we provide. Thanks.
Very good. Councillor Buckley.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, the values I see are very important, the respect, collaboration, integrity and accountability. And I was very pleased to see that it was made clear that the chair had to be independent and certainly couldn't be held by the mayor. So that was good to see the clarification in this document. So my question...
Sorry, Councillor Buckley, just to clarify, the mayor doesn't chair the Audit and Risk Committee and
Correct.
never has.
And shouldn't have tried to put themselves in that position.
Sorry, point of order. The mayor should have chaired a meeting that wasn't an Audit and Risk Committee meeting. It was a meeting of council. So do you have a question, Councillor Buckley?
I do. So just in regards to accountability, with the Audit and Risk Committee, they were consulted in regards to the changes to this document. And my question is, were they happy with this document as it stands?
Through you, Mayor.
Go ahead, CEO.
The Audit and Risk Committee, thank you for the question. The Audit and Risk Committee have been fully involved in the Charter and its development and have seen multiple versions of the Charter. It would be fair to say it's probably actually taken us a little bit longer than we'd anticipated to get this Charter finalised, because there has been significant amount of consultation. And you'll recall in my introductory comments, it was the Audit and Risk Committee that actually wanted to review the Charter in the first place. So there has been a significant amount of engagement and consultation around this. There's been some great debates as well in regards to some of the items in it, and we've been able to work through those in the committee meetings. So yes, my understanding is from the meetings I've attended and from what I've heard and seen is that they are supportive of this Charter as it is presented, and it was formally, I don't know if the word is, Mr. Cann, is it endorsed? It was formally recommended at the last Audit and Risk Committee to come to Council for adoption.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions? Just a quick question I have, CEO. And again, I just note my notes from the 25th of the 7th, and indeed the Audit and Risk Committee resolved to adopt the Charter. And my notes indicate that they wanted information on conflict of interest from MAV, and we've included that in that Charter, I believe.
Yes, back through you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. So there's been a fair bit of discussion about conflict of interest. The Audit and Risk Committee for councils is set up under the Local Government Act. The Local Government Act is very clear about the provisions of conflict of interest being material or general, and so it's very clear. There are other pieces of legislation that talk about various conflicts and how they are managed. However, as the Audit and Risk Committee is a committee of council that is formed under the provisions of the Local Government Act, the Local Government Act conflict of interest provisions are what is applied to the Audit and Risk Committee.
Yep, great. Thanks for that clarification. Are there any further questions, councillors? Councillor Uri.
No further questions, but I'm happy to move the...
Thank you. I was just going to ask if there is somebody who have a motion. Well, I have a seconder then. Councillor Allen, thank you. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. I would just briefly. And also just sort of to partially respond to some of the questions. I think I would endorse the CEO's comments about this. As a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, and I don't think since I've been on this committee that I've missed one meeting, so I've been there for the whole time. I think they've been through a really thorough process over the last months to look at this Charter. There were individual questionnaires sent out to each member of the Audit and Risk Committee to garner each individual's thoughts about the current Charter and what needed to be changed, and then that was all collated, and then there were a number of drafts. So it was a really thorough process. I think that the new Charter, I'm really happy with the new Charter because I think it does clarify a lot of things which the committee wanted to have clarified, and in particular the roles of that committee of council, and I think that's been done very well. So I'm really happy to support the recommendation here.
Thanks, Councillor Uri. Councillor Allen.
Only just to back up what Mendy has said about the roles and that, I think during my time on the committee, if there was one point of confusion, it was some of the committee members didn't really understand what their roles were and what were the roles of officers, etc. But it is a very, very important committee to council, and I think that it does a very, very good job in conjunction with the auditors who participate in the meetings of making sure that our governance and integrity is always at the top of their agenda. So I think that this is a good thing that we've reviewed their charter, and I have no hesitation in recommending that we accept it.
Great, thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak to or against the motion? Councillor Buckley.
I'll speak to the motion. I have attended in a listening capacity to audit and risk meetings, and I understand the importance of it. I'm impressed with the calibre of people who sit in on the committee, and I trust that they will ensure that there is transparency and accountability in the decision-making processes that we undertake, and also hold the council under scrutiny, as should any board or corporation, etc., or any administrative body should have that scrutiny. So I support the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, I'd just like to note that I think the calibre and the rigour that the members bring is really, really impressive. So having two local members, another member who works in another Victorian local government entity, and one of our members who works interstate, brings a real diversity and depth of skill, and it's very reassuring to have those members. And I think that the comments from the Chair around the improved focus on strategic issues that the Audit and Risk Committee have brought is really important. That's important, and especially the work that they have brought to the table around climate risk. That's something that this Audit and Risk Committee are really focusing on, because it's there and it is a risk to this organisation. So I'd just like to also commend this particular motion, and I'll put the motion to the vote now. All those in favour? Thanks, councillors. Carried unanimously, CEO. And we're looking at item 5.2, assets and environment. Let me just scroll down to my point here. Ms Weigel, how are you? This will be one of yours. And the addition of roads to the council's Register of Public Roads.
Thank you, Mayor. And through you, tonight we have a report for Council's consideration to add an additional 6 roads to our Register of Public Roads. As councillors would be aware, the way council manages its roads is dictated by the Road Management Act, which requires that we have both a road management plan, which outlines how we will manage our roads, and a Register of Public Roads, which identifies which roads are managed in that way. So therefore, for our maintenance work to be undertaken on roads, they need to be on our Register of Public Roads. And for those of you who have looked at it, the document is on our website. It's a very extensive list going to many, many pages. So councillors, as part of the process, we periodically add and occasionally take roads away from the Register of Public Roads. Tonight we are proposing that we add 6 roads to the register, 4 of which are to be added because they provide primary access to residential properties, and 2 are suggested are added because they provide other important functions. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. Councillor Stowe, questions?
I noticed that one of the roads advised is an unnamed road. Now it's on our register. Are we likely to name that road?
I believe we will need to, I believe we will need to, because otherwise we would have unnamed roads all over the place. But
I think I've seen an unnamed road before. Yeah.
yes, that we will eventually get to it. The main thing is to start maintaining it now, and then we can go through the process, which is an alternate process for working through how to register and name the road.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stowe. Just for the record, Councillor Greason has left this particular item. She declared a conflict of interest and is no longer with us, and we'll retrieve her when we're done. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Ms Weigel, through you, Mayor, I just have a question in regards to how the process works for application for adding to the road register, such as, say, if a road, for instance, like the SAC track in Benambra, needed to be added to the road register. How does that process work, just so that community are aware?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, through you, Mayor.
As long as you declare a conflict of interest over it, it can be applied for.
As-
Go ahead, Ms Weigel.
outlined, there are a variety of ways that we look at these roads. Some is through public, usually people that live on the roads, nominating that they believe that there's a reason and a requirement for the road to be maintained by council. Others is through our own road maintenance functions, or as we're adding roads through our the development processes or through our capital program. So there's a variety of ways. It's very important to note, though, and it's outlined in the report, there are a range of criteria that we consider when we're looking at whether a road should be added. It doesn't mean that all roads are added, and we have a number of tracks that are not on our register of public roads. So really it needs to either provide access to a principal place of residence, provide the single closest point of access to a rateable property holding, is located on suitable land in a road reserve or a crown land. The council has relevant authority to lawfully have a road and is not maintained by another authority. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor White?
Just firstly, before the question, a quick comment. We've got an item about monuments coming up. So if somebody can't get on the monument list, could they get the unnamed road named after them?
There's
a process.
There's a criteria for that as well, Councillor White, but one of those is we can't name roads over living people, so there was perhaps some
Were you thinking of a former mayor, Councillor White?
Oh, no, I declare a conflict. So, but the question is the Pert Street extension is, because I know the street well, so is that to actually get more access into the college for people to use that as an alternative access point?
That's correct. We're working very closely with NAGL at the moment, and we've done some work to upgrade that part of the road and fix some culverts around there. So we're now working with the school to see if we can't make that either a bus entrance access into and out of the school to help relieve some of that congestion around the Lindenow Road, Princes Highway intersection. Thank you.
Good thing too. Yep. Terrific. Thanks for that. And I'd particularly point that out. That's a nice piece of work, councillors. Any further questions, councillors? In which case, councillors, there is a recommendation. Do I have a motion? Councillor Stowe, thank you. Councillor White, thank you. Councillor Stowe.
Yes, look, these are important things to do to get these roads on the registrar. Just to give an example, Tea Tree Lane is a small little road down the back of Raymond Island, but there's a 90-year-old lady that lives down there, and there was some dispute over who owned the land, whether it was DELP or council or whatever. And in the meantime, the lady was having trouble accessing her property because of tea tree hanging over the road, because of puddles over the road. And it's good to see it on the register, and she's delighted and her daughter's delighted. And also the one you mentioned up at Perth Street, it's only 110 metres, but that 110 metres links us up with Nagle College and possibly even St Mary's, which could be a great advantage in traffic management in the future. So I have pleasure in moving this motion.
Spot on. Thanks, Councillor Stowe. Councillor White?
Yes, I certainly agree with those comments, but also the fact that more and more people are moving to our area and finding places to buy and to build on, and of course sometimes these are on roads that aren't on the register. So it's good that council are keeping an eye on this to afford them access to their principal place of residence, which is a commitment that we make to them if they, So I think it's great.
Good on you. Thank you. Motion opposed, councillors? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Thanks, councillors. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously, CEO. Thank you. Thanks, councillors. It's good work. Let's retrieve Councillor Greason from somewhere at Streaky Bay near Ceduna, eating oysters, I believe. Councillors, we're on to item 5.2.2, which is the contract extension, contract 2018-1195, Green Waste Processing and Removal Service.
Thank you, Mayor.
If we could just make sure that Councillor Greason is back and on visible.
There is Councillor Greason. Very good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report which is as outlined as a contract extension. As councillors would be aware, Green Waste, with our extensive number of residents in the area, Green Waste is an important function of our waste department. We actually receive waste at 11 of green waste at 11 of our transfer stations and landfills. So we need to have a process for mulching that green waste and then using it accordingly. So we have had a contract in place since 2018 with an external contractor who has done a very good job for us, and we're looking to extend that contract by a further 12 months. The contract had provisions within it to allow for a further 12-month extension, subject to the discretion of council. So that is why this is coming back to you for consideration of that, actioning that option to extend the contract. I have with me this evening Wayne Bath, who is the Manager of Waste and Sustainability and Waste Minimisation, who can answer any of your questions around green waste or the contract in detail. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. This gladdens my heart, the green waste. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Crook, then Councillor White.
Thank you. I just wonder whether this particular contract also includes the mulching provision and trial that we're currently undertaking. Is this the same contractor or is that separate?
This is for the mulching contract. So it's not for composting, it's for mulching. But certainly all of our green waste that comes into sites is then mulched in this way. So Mr Bath, would you like to add anything further to that?
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Yeah, so they mulch and just cart their waste. We've been using it in recent times for rehabilitating landfills. But yeah, the mulch that will happen over the next 12 months, some of that will be used in our trial, composting trial that will begin shortly.
Okay, thank you.
You good with that, Councillor Crook? Yep, great. Councillor White.
I'm good with it too. That was my question.
Your same question?
Wondering, how we were going with the next stage of after mulching to become the compost. So that was the same question.
Yep, great. Councillor Uri?
Thank you. Along similar vein, please, Mr Bath. So the trials involve the sale of the mulch to the public, or there's one step before that to trial it within council?
To trial it within council, it then has to be tested and pass Australian standards, and then we can look at either using it ourselves for our parks and gardens or selling it. Yeah. We will have quite a bit following the trial, so we can look at that later, how that happens.
Okay, so for members of the public who have been a bit interested in this, we're still maybe 12 months off.
So we're certainly getting a lot closer. We've been doing some small trials. We're now moving towards, we've done the business case to look at how we would manage that. And we've done some sending it away and having it tested with the small trials. We'll now start to scale that up and look at how we use that. As Mr Bath said, we've got quite a demand for it ourselves in our parks and gardens, but there's also opportunities to look at how we provide that to the public or to our agricultural sector. So there's some great opportunities coming out of this. Thank you.
Very good, very interesting. I was just pausing there for a moment on having seen quite a lot of chipped roadside vegetation that the contractors seem to leave in strategic places that many residents fall on, like seagulls on hot chips, and take it home for their gardens. We look forward to that trial becoming a reality, I hope. Councillors, are there any further questions? If there aren't, then we do have a recommendation, and Councillor Crook is going to move it, and Councillor Greason, who scratched their nose, is seconding it. Is that all right, Councillor Greason? Terrific, thank you. Councillor Buckley, you were close. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Certainly. Obviously, the processing of green waste at our waste facilities is a really important function and service our council provides for the community. It's, by and large, it's a free service, paid for by a rates base, I guess. It's really important. It allows people to recycle and reuse their green waste, and obviously we need a mechanism to get rid of it out of our yards keep the place tidy, mitigate against the fire risk. So it's an important function that we perform, and we need to ensure that we have a good contractor to do that, and I think this, the motion before us will do just that.
Good on you. Thanks, Councillor Crook. Councillor Grecian, would you like to speak to the motion?
And I really can't add much to what Councillor Crook just said. I think it's a very exciting trial, and I'm looking forward to its conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Buckley.
I'd love to speak for the motion.
Good on you.
I've been wanting to see this happen for a couple of decades. I just think like many things in government, it takes time, but this is well overdue, and I look forward to seeing a lot of good compost, because our environment, it really relies on making sure that there are microorganisms in our soils, and if we're a fair dinkum about having good environmental policies, this is a good step forward, and I'd even like to see it supplied to community, for a peppercorn, just to encourage people to spread it around.
Sorry,
So
councillors, I'm just going to jump in here and clarify that this is the mulching contract and it's not the composting yet. So
No,
I know we're enthusiastic
I understand.
about that, so this is just the mulching component. Yep. Good.
Yes,
Okay.
I understand. I'm just enthusiastic, that's all.
Good. We like that enthusiasm and we're casting ahead, and that's fine. Thanks, councillors. Anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case I'll put the motion to the vote. Thank you, councillors. All those in favour? Thanks, CEO. That's carried unanimously. Councillors, we're moving on to contract 5.2.3, which is contract 2023-1485, Peppercorn Park, Bairnsdale City Oval, change rooms extension and upgrade. And this is authorised by you, Fiona. And I wonder, is that Morgana Tapawa going to speak to it?
I will introduce it.
Thank you.
And then Morgana is here as the relevant manager to
Lovely.
any technical questions. So thank you, Mayor. As you've outlined, it's an exciting contract for upgrades to Peppercorn Park, which is part of the Bairnsdale City Oval complex, which is one of our premier sporting complexes in the Shire and here in Bairnsdale. The report, as you will note, is supported by a confidential attachment that provides councillors with the details of the tender evaluation undertaken. So just quickly, some of the salient points in the report for councillors to consider are that procurement has been undertaken in accordance with the East Gippsland Shire Council's procurement policy. The Making of Bairnsdale City Oval female-friendly project has been divided into two stages. The first stage is the stage which is before you tonight, which is a contract to upgrade the change rooms and make sure that they have female-friendly facilities. The second stage, which is not part of this contract, is actually upgrading the oval, Peppercorn Park Oval itself, to take some of the pressure off the main oval. The project is partially funded by a state government through Sport and Recreation Victoria. The works that will be undertaken as part of this contract will encompass the full refurbishment of the existing change rooms, including full redevelopment of the ablutions, independent trainers' rooms and coaching rooms. There will be significant work that has already been occurred in various parts of the oval and the oval complex. The change rooms are aged and in poor condition and do not meet the necessary female-friendly standards. With women's and junior girls AFL teams already using the facility on a regular basis, and female cricket participation on the rise, and a desire to attract elite sporting competitions and events, it's a high priority for East Gippsland that these female-friendly facilities are introduced. The facilities were also identified back when we were doing the Bairnsdale Sporting Facilities Plan back in 2018, which included extensive community and stakeholder consultation. As we've mentioned, Morgana Tapawa is here as our Manager of Assets and Planning and Development to respond to any technical questions, but we put the report to you for consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms Weigel. Councillors, are there any questions of our officers? Councillor Uri.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm not sure who this is directed to, but I'm interested to know what the extent of work yet to be done is in terms of getting our recreational facilities. It's not about this particularly, but how much work is in front of us to get our sporting facilities up to standard in terms of gender equity?
So we're working, thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. I'm happy to answer this one. We're working through that. We have a prioritised program. We've started with Bairnsdale, and now we're working through a program looking at all of our sporting facilities across the Shire, which will identify those and look at need and usage and the requirements of the various codes. We have been providing quite a focus on this area of late, but there is still some way to go with a number of facilities that are still, traditional facilities that were very male sport focused. So councillors may have seen that there's been quite a bit of media around the state government's position on supporting female-friendly facilities. We're anticipating that we will see a number of other funding opportunities that will allow us to put forward more facilities and make sure that we're supporting all genders to participate in active sport throughout the Shire. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Uri. Councillor Greason, I saw you had your hand up, but it's popped down again, so...
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councillor Uri asked pretty much the same question that I was
okay.
going to ask.
Councillor Stowe?
Am I right in saying that this will bring the Bairnsdale Oval up to a similar standard of what we're seeing over at Lucknow, which was recently done, and now we'll have 2 first-class facilities available?
Yes, you're correct, Councillor Stowe. That'll bring it to the same standard. And then as we're building new facilities like the World facilities, they will also be of a similar standard. So absolutely, we'll have 2 AFL-focused facilities in Bairnsdale that will be of that standard to attract all sorts of competitions to the region. And we'll also have hockey, netball and soccer facilities that will be of a similar standard.
Thank you. I look forward to Collingwood coming up and playing a practice match against perhaps Carlton.
Sorry, that's a point of order. The point is that Collingwood shouldn't be allowed this far east.
You want a war, Mayor?
Councillor, are there any further questions? I do have a question, Ms Weigel. It's around people who identify as non-binary or LGBTIQA+ participants in sport and how we're going. I note that we have a focus on degenderising our sporting facilities, but this is another challenge for us. And how are we going in making our sporting facilities really inclusive?
It's a very good question, and it's one that the team is starting to give some real consideration to. We are often dictated to by the sporting codes about how the facilities, what the facility standards need to be. So a lot of this will be driven by the sporting codes at a state and national level, but we are starting to see movement in that way. We also have, a number of non-gender facilities that are included in our new facility designs and all abilities spaces. So whilst that's perhaps not ideal, it at least gives us a transition point while we work out what the codes are going to be requiring in this space.
Great, good. Thanks for that answer. We look forward to that becoming a much more regular part of our work. We know that when we make our facilities available and inclusive for the most vulnerable people, we make them inclusive for everybody. Absolutely. Councillors, are there any further questions? Thanks for presenting that report. Councillors, we have a recommendation and I wonder if I have a motion. Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen, you are going to request the officer's recommendation, and that's what we see on the screen above us.
Yes, that's right. And could I ask that the blanks being filled in, please, Mayor?
So, Councillor, you are asking for the blanks to be filled in, and I think you need to specify what they need to be filled in with. Yes, sorry.
Sorry.
If you can do that.
Yes, so we need to fill in Car Build Construction Limited for a total of $518,733 exclusive of GST. Please.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Can you check the details on the screen there and make sure that they are accurate?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Terrific. Is there a seconder, councillors? Councillor Crook. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, participation in sport is one thing that we should be encouraging at all levels, and particularly female participation. And change rooms and toilet facilities have been a great disincentive, and to start or to continue the process of providing adequate facilities, particularly for our female participants, is a very, very necessary and good thing, and I'm very pleased to see that it's been advanced.
Fantastic. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak?
Indeed, just to second what Councillor Allen has said, it's an important upgrade for a key piece of our sporting infrastructure.
Thanks very much. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case, councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. Carried unanimously, CEO. Councillors, well done. We did that all right, did we, Mr Cannizzaro? Thank you. Good. 100%. Councillors, we're on to the next item, which is item 5.2.4, contract 2023-1495, Moroney Street, Bairnsdale Reconstruction Stage 2. Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you, Mayor. As they've outlined, this is a contract for Stage 2 of an important upgrade of Moroney Street, which is one of our main streets in Bairnsdale, which was not at the same standard as many of our other urban streets throughout the Bairnsdale and our other urban areas. As well as detailing the recommendations, the report is supported with a confidential attachment that provides councillors with the details of the tender evaluation undertaken. Some of the salient points for council to consider are that Moroney Street is a 2-kilometre urban access road in West Bairnsdale. It is a high traffic street in a residential area with a school and daycare facilities nearby. Parts of the road currently have safety, drainage and amenity deficiencies, which will be addressed through this project. Stage 2 works will be extended from the intersection of McKean Street to the intersection of Birchwood Court, Bairnsdale. The overall objective, as I've said, is to bring the Moroney Street up to a consistent seal width, new underground drainage, curb and channel, footpath, parking lanes, tree planting and the upgrade of all intersections. Given the length of the street, the upgrade has been undertaken in stages, with a final stage to be still undertaken. Procurement has been undertaken in accordance with East Gippsland Shire Council's procurement policy. Also present with me tonight is the Manager of Capital Projects and Plant, Sayaram Jagathawasawaram, who is available to respond to any questions of a technical nature.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions of our officers? Councillor Crook.
Thank you. I wonder what provisions have been made for active transport in this development. I know that we're making the road a bit wider and there is at least a footpath, but what considerations have been made for active transport?
Thank you, Councillor. I may put this over to Sai to address, and then I have some follow-up comments if necessary.
Good question. Thank you. Good evening, Sai. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. Look, in terms of provision for your question, I'll have to take that on note and get back to you. I'm lost that one, sorry.
So I can perhaps add to that. Some time ago that we worked with the then Vic Roads, now Department of Transport, to develop a priority plan for the upgrade of our active transport network through Bairnsdale. So some of the focus has been on some of those missing components of that pathway and those pathways. There's still more work to do on the active transport network. With this area, it is a Roads to Recovery funded project, so it was very much focused. This project is very much focused on roads. It does make some provision for active transport, but that is active on-road transport. There are footpaths on within the street that are also being upgraded as part of the project, but it is not been designed primarily as an active transport laneway, or one of our priority routes, has been very much focused on the pedestrian network and making sure that we provide pedestrian and road safety improvements through the slowing down of traffic through the road network as well. But taking that on board, we are also doing some more work more generally around the planning of our active transport networks, and we will have another look at all of this area as part of that as well.
Thanks for that, Councillor Stowe.
Question to you, Fiona. Is it correct that there is in fact active transport, that's bicycles and pedestrians, available in Wallace Street, which is juxtaposed to Moroney Street, very close, and runs parallel to Moroney Street where people could easily use it? And also, is it correct that that street links up with the Bairnsdale West Primary School and also the secondary college? So there is in fact ample room for bikes and pedestrians in that vicinity.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe, and through you, Mayor. That's right. And as I mentioned, when we're looking at priority routes for active transport, Wallace Street was identified as one of those priority routes. So part of the work we're doing at the moment with the World will upgrade that the network there. We also have a second stage which will take that network all the way through down onto McKean Street and join the high school as well. So that was identified as a higher priority in terms of network than the works that we're currently doing. Thank you.
Thanks, councillors. Are there any further questions? Okay, councillors, there is a recommendation. John, did you have a question? No?
Just getting in early. Yeah, no, you go.
You ready to... Councillors, there is a recommendation. Is there a motion? I reckon Councillor Buckley jumped in there pretty quick smart, I'm sorry, and Councillor White might have come in second. Any other advances on that, councillors?
Go to the replay.
We might have to have a, umpire's decision. Councillor Buckley and seconded Councillor White. Okay. Councillor Buckley. You're happy to move the motion?
I'm happy to move the motion and accept that the tender is submitted by Cranes Asphalting and Bitumen Sealing Proprietary Limited for the contract amount of $1,508,655.50.
Fantastic, thank you. Councillor Buckley, just check what's on the screen and make sure that that is an accurate depiction of what you have just read and are asking.
I believe so.
Terrific. Councillor White, you've seconded this motion. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion?
Most certainly. I think we're all very pleased to see Moroney Street finally getting the attention it deserves. I lived on Moroney Street formerly, and traversed its dangerous edges. So it's a really good undertaking, and I'm sure that the contractor will do a fabulous job of it, and look forward to seeing it completed and for the safety of our community. So it's something that I'm very pleased to see happen.
Very, very good. Councillor White.
Thank you. I think I can trump Councillor Buckley. My wife lived on Moroney Street, but I've had my eye on Moroney Street as as desperately needing an upgrade before I ever got on council, and there was quite a few people that I knew had contacted me many times once I got on council to sort of say, it's time we got some love and care, because it's an old part of town and the road is not up to today's standards. So been advocating for this for some time, and now we're up to stage 2, which basically means we're 2/3 of the way, and I think it's a great outcome. I'm glad that we were able to fund it at this stage, and hopefully stage 3 I should say, travels along swiftly to get it completed, and because it did look unloved, and it's going to make the people who live there, I think, very happy and proud of where they live, and it will give their own homes, it'll give them a lift and look very pleasant.
Definitely. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion?
Yes, I'd like to speak for it. Moroney Street's been waiting for this upgrade for about 50 years. They've been very patient up there. The stage one, I think, is a credit to the contractors and the council. It's just an excellent result, and I think stage two will be equally as good. Look forward to it and stage three being completed.
Very good. Councillors, any further speakers for or against the item? In which case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. Carried unanimously. Councillors, we're moving on to item 5.2.5, Contract 2022-1480, which is the asphalting of various roads in East Gippsland Shire. It's your night, Ms Weigel.
Thank you, Mayor. As you've outlined, this is another one of our important contracts for the asphalting of our various roads. Councillors, this contract is slightly different. It's what we term a panel of contractors, which means that we can appoint more than one contractor to undertake this work for us. And it's based on a schedule of rates, which will be considered. So in putting this together, again, there is it's supported with a confidential attachment that provides councillors with the details of the tender evaluation undertaken. And it also provides councillors with those schedules of rates for the various treatments of asphalting our roads. Councillors, the salient points in the report for the council to consider are, as council knows, we're responsible for over 1,290 kilometres, and I think we've just added a couple more, of sealed road, and approximately 90 car parks, 3 aerodromes, including internal roads, and 14 kilometres of shed paths and footpaths, which means that a lot of asphalting and bitumen work is undertaken. All of these require renewal and upgrade on a cyclical basis, and in the interest of looking after our assets and in accordance with our road management plan. So therefore, this provides an important part of our service to our community through having well-maintained roads and that are in a suitable condition. Procurement of this contract has been undertaken in accordance with East Gippsland Shire Council's procurement policy. And we also have with us tonight, again, Si, who is our Manager of Capital Projects and Plant, who is available to answer any questions of technical nature.
Very good. Thank you, Fiona. Councillors, are there any questions? None noted. Okay, councillors. There is a recommendation. Do I have a motion? Councillor Crook. It would have seconded Councillor Greason. Thank you. The officers were terrified this was going to lapse. Councillor Crook.
I don't know why there was so much reservation there. Asphalting.
Asphalting.
It's an important service. We need somebody to asphalt all of our roads. It seems that it's been through the appropriate tender panel process.
So, Councillor Crook, I just need you to populate. So, keep your powder dry, because that's important, what you just said. But I'm wondering if you are happy to fill those blanks on the screen.
Yes,
maybe about page 112, I think.
Yep, I am indeed. I'm happy to fill them with Fowler's Asphalting Proprietary Limited. Have I got the right one there?
Yep, that's it. Yep, correct.
Where am I looking?
Page 112 on your agenda also has...
Oh, yes, and Crane's Asphalting and Bitumen Sealing Proprietary Limited. But there doesn't appear to be an amount there. It's a schedule of rates, is it?
There's a schedule of rates, yes, thank you. That's fine. That's it. Absolutely. Thank you.
No worries.
Could you just check the screen and make sure that what is written there is accurate?
Yes, I believe so.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Greason, did you second that? Terrific. Councillor Crook, would you like now to speak to the motion?
Oh, certainly. And
Thank you.
as I said before, asphalting is a very important service that we need, not something that we can deliver in-house, not having the appropriate plant and equipment. So we outsource that to some very capable local enterprises, which we're doing in this case. So I have no hesitation in recommending
Thank you.
the motion.
Great. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
Oh, no, just to support it. $15 million over 5 years really probably isn't a lot when you think about how much road we have out in East Gippsland that needs to be supported, but this is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the motion opposed? Councillors, would anybody else like to speak to or against, for or against the motion? Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, CEO. Carried unanimously. Councillors, well done. We've moved through those sets of contracts and Mr Cannizzaro is breathing easily now. We're moving on to item 5.3.1, which is transfer of committee responsibilities, Beaufort Memorial Gardens. And Mr Cannizzaro, take us away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report titled The Transfer of Committee Responsibilities for the Beaufort Memorial Gardens. The purpose of this report, councillors, is to seek council's approval to terminate the existing management agreement with Beaufort Memorial Gardens Committee Incorporated and to transfer the committee's responsibilities to the Bairnsdale RSL Sub-Branch Inc. The key points tonight, councillors, for you to consider with this report are the committee has been the driving force in developing the gardens as a key memorial to the Royal Australian Air Force and other service personnel across many different conflicts. Over many years, the care and management arrangements for the gardens have evolved, but due to a diminishing number of committee members, there is a need to review the management arrangements of the gardens to ensure longevity and care for this important memorial. To that end, Council has been approached by the Honourable Tim Bull, MP member from Gippsland East, and Mr Alan Pappen, who is the President of the Bairnsdale Return Services League of Bairnsdale RSL Sub-Branch, seeking to change the current committee arrangements. To note also, the land on which the gardens has been developed is owned wholly by Council, and Council entered into a management agreement with the committee on the 21st of December 2004. So the proposed officer recommendation contained within this report essentially maintains the status quo, but for the care and management of gardens to be run through the Bairnsdale RSL sub-branch instead of the incorporated committee. So the report and recommendations are presented to you tonight, councillors, for your consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr Cannizzaro, and it's a rather long recommendation for what appears to be a simple thing to do. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Stowe.
Could I just confirm there'll be no additional cost to council with the new arrangements if they're passed?
We would, and you'll note in one of the recommendations, Councillor Stowe, and through you, Mayor, that it does not create an unreasonable cost burden on council. So we have that at the top of mind to ensure that is the case.
Thanks, Mr Cannizzaro. Councillor Stowe, item or recommendation 5F, I think.
Yes.
Draw your attention to that. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Crook.
I'm aware that the lighting, the current lighting that's installed there is gas-driven, I believe to understand. I'm wondering if there are any plans to upgrade or change that. Obviously, the installation of a solar light would be significantly cheaper in the long run.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Crook, and through you, Mayor. I might hand to Ms Weigel, who can respond to that.
Thank you, Mr Cannizzaro, and through you, Mayor. As councillors are aware, we've had considerable effort into replacing all of our street lights and all of our public lighting to LED lighting to reduce our emissions associated with our public lighting. So we're certainly looking at what we can do with these lights as well. I've asked the sustainability team to look at lighting that perhaps still has that gas feel to it, but is not gas. So we're certainly looking at it. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Great. Councillor White? You're ready to move?
I'm ready to move.
Ready to move, right, okay. Are there any further questions, councillors? There is a recommendation. Councillor White has a motion. Councillor Stowe seconded it. Councillor White, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. This garden, I can speak to it from its inception. It holds a significant place in my family, in that my father, who was a returned serviceman, and my mum, who was, assisting him, my dad and his colleagues at the RSL helped to raise the money to build that, in recognition of all the serving men and women. And it would be a tragedy if anything was to happen to that monument. And it sits there, and it's been well maintained. But as we all know, the servicemen and women in numbers has deteriorated significantly over the years, and of course their age now prevents them from doing a lot. So I would recommend this to councillors that we support this motion.
Very good. Councillor Stowe?
Yes, age shall not weary them, but a few have passed away, regrettably. Look, I can remember too when it happened, and very fine people like your relatives, John, and Jimmy Prendergast, and all these are involved and got it set up, and it was a great asset to the town. But as you say, regrettably, a lot of those people aren't around. The others that are around have got old and weary, and it seems logical the RSL would take this over, so fully support the motion.
Hear, hear. Thanks, Councillor Stowe. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Thanks, councillors, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillors. Carried unanimously, CEO. Thank you. Councillors, we're moving on to item 5.4, Place and Community, and 5.4.1, the planning permit application 171/2021/P5317 Princess Highway, Newmerella, major promotion sign, amended plans. Stuart McConnell, good evening, and I see Robert Pringle there as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report regarding a proposed double-sided major promotion sign at 5317 Princess Highway, Newmerella, which is currently before VCAT. You will recall this council considered this matter some months ago and decided to issue a notice of refusal. And officers are recommending tonight that council's previous decision to issue a notice of refusal is again affirmed. The key points that are relevant in this case: the proposal was originally assessed as being inconsistent with the provisions of the planning scheme. A VCAT appeal was lodged by the applicant, and in preparation for that appeal, officers identified the existence of a power line easement on the land which precluded approval of the sign in the proposed location. The application was then amended to change the location of the sign. It also removed illumination and reduced the size of the sign. So we now have an amended application that's before VCAT. In order to represent council at VCAT, officers require a position from council on the amended application, and officers maintain that even though there has been some amendments to the application, it remains inconsistent with the planning scheme as outlined in the report that you have. So the recommendation of officers is to affirm the previous decision, and officers are of the view that this is an area in which we do particularly want to see, or do particularly want to avoid, a proliferation of advertising signs, and in doing so seeking to maintain the amenity of that section through Newmerella, which is an important stretch along the Princess Highway. I also note that there have been previous signs proposed in the area, and that a previous application was not supported at VCAT. And whilst each application needs to be considered on its merits, our expectation is that others will be looking at council's position and view in relation to this application and considering their options as well. Mayor, as you noted, online tonight, To assist with any questions of detail is Robert Pringle, and Martin Richardson is also available. The report is presented for your consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thanks Mr McConnell, and thank you Martin Richardson's there as well. Councillors, are there some questions? Any questions? Clarification? Councillor Crook.
Thank you.
Then Buckley and Greason.
I recall when the similar proposal came, the initial proposal came before us, there was quite a few objections from local residents. Has a provision been made with this latest application for them to voice their concerns?
I'll
Thank you, Councillor
ask
Crook.
Robert Pringle.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Crook, and through you, Mayor.
Yep.
Yes, in accordance with the requirements of VCAT, all referral authorities and the individuals who were subject to notice and the objectors to the application were all provided a copy of the amended application and had an extended period of time to make a submission or join the matter as respondents. To my knowledge, there's been no joint respondents added to this case, and I do believe that may be based on Council's initial position on the matter.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Councillor Crook? Yep. Councillor Buckley.
Yes, thank you. Look, initially I recall that I voted in the affirmative for the sign to go up, and I see that there has been some amendments made to it to ensure that it's not as in your face, I suppose, as what it may have been. And I understand that it is a country area. We don't want to clutter up our roadsides with signs, and I understand the concerns about setting precedents. So, you know, that the open slather for these types of billboards to go ahead. However, it is right near a service station. There's already signs existing there. So I'm just wondering, do you believe that the changes, albeit now that are safer, now that it's a bit smaller and further away from the power lines, etc.? Or the powers.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. I'll ask Robert Pringle to respond on that.
So, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Mayor, could I just get clarification? You're asking, do you think that the proposal is less detrimental to the amenity? Is that the angle?
Yeah, that's right. Less detrimental now that the changes have been made.
Thank you for the question and clarification, and through you, Mayor. My suggestion is that it is not any less detrimental than the original proposal. There are some modifications to the size of the sign, and the position of the sign may address some roadside issues. However, it does potentially put the sign in line and less screened from a residential property to the immediate north. Now, when I say residential property, I mean a residential dwelling on commercial zoned land, and we recognise that there is a zoning anomaly in the Newmerella township, but it is a residential use, and this amended location of the sign would be more in line with some of the windows of that residence, and previously they may have been screened by a tree in between the sign and the dwelling. So overall, the assessment is that the overall amenity impact is not really any less than what we originally assessed, and that's why we're sticking with the recommendation that we've made.
Thank you.
Councillor Greason.
This is a tricky one, isn't it? And I think previously I also supported the sign going ahead. And the reasons for that is that it is commercial land. It's not a particularly scenic section of the road. There is another sign there. There's the petrol station, etc.
Councillor Greason, do you have a question? Do you have a question of clarification?
Yeah, I do.
Yep.
Yeah. So sorry. Yeah. My question is, can you talk about why precisely it doesn't meet the planning rules? And also, you talk about, it's now in direct view of the residential properties there, but I didn't think our planning rules required us to protect people's views, unfortunately, but I thought that was the case. So there's just two questions there. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grecian, and through you, Mayor. In terms of the points of what council officers have considered, it is largely policy-based considerations. There are decision guidelines that we need to look through when we consider the impact of signs, and there are several points in those decision guidelines where we've suggested that the proposal fails to meet the design guidelines. In terms of a point by point, I'd probably have to pull up one of my other reports and my VCAT submission to go through those details, but talks about conflicts at intersections and the potential to confuse or distract drivers using the road, and the character and amenity aspects as well. So we don't have a lot of commercial activity there currently. Yes, there is potential for that to change, but our position is that signs are not necessarily the type of activity that we want to promote. If the signs are in association with a business on the property, that may be a different outcome. And certainly if there was a commercial premises proposed that was also proposing additional signage, that might alter the perspective of officers in this recommendation. The overarching policy and the decision that was made previously at VCAT relied on the policy statements in our existing planning scheme in relation to scenic routes and the protection and preservation of those routes as natural as possible. If we start to put up a number of road signs advertising far-flung activities or other outcomes, it isn't necessarily contributing much to the amenity of the locality nor to the business and growth of the locality. We'd much rather see genuine business activity rather than promotion of something happening in another locality.
Councillor Grecian,
leave it there.
Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor White.
Thank you, Robert. I've got two questions. One is, wouldn't you have considered it quite a concession, the fact that the developer or the owner of the signs has decided not to illuminate them? So that was something that was quite a complex issue the first time around. And the other would be, you're talking about people's view. It is industrial land. What happens to the person with the house if somebody decided to build a factory there? You would have no view. Would council object to somebody actually building on that block because it is industrial land?
Thank you, Councillor White, and through you, Mayor, and with apologies to Councillor Grecian for not addressing that aspect of her question as well. In terms of view, I think the question isn't necessarily about a view being blocked. It's about what is being presented. I think most of us would agree that if a development were to occur, sort of bricks and mortar and activity, that is a different outcome than looking at a static, in this case, advertising face. I don't think most people would like to have just an image that's promoting a certain thing flashed in your face every time you look out a window. Now that is a bit more of a personal judgment than a professional judgment, but I think it overlaps into professional judgment as well, in that there is a difference between an activity happening on the land and something that is a static image. Sorry, Councillor White, can you just remind me of the first part of your question there?
The fact that they withdrew the illumination of the sign, I think that's quite significant.
Thank you for clarifying, and through you, Mayor. Yes, that was a point of contention and a point that we had mentioned in the first round of draft conditions that we had presented towards VCAT, the discussion about removal of illumination. That obviously goes to overnight impact and the potential to reduce distraction when coming into sort of a commercial area that has light and more light versus driving through the majority of the Princess Highway, which is unlit. But I'll clarify that the same amendment was proposed to the sign that previously went to VCAT and was lost. And despite that amendment to remove the illumination from that proposal, the member considered that there was still an amenity impact and that that should not be approved in the format that it was proposed.
Thanks, thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't have a question, but I would like to move the recommendation when we're ready, please.
Terrific. Are you moving that the motion be put?
Yes, I'm moving the officer's recommendation as put.
Okay, all right. So thank you. And Councillor Allen is seconding it. Thank you. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, just briefly. I think as this relates to visual amenity, perhaps we'll all come at this from a slightly different angle, and it really depends on how we envisage this. I'm convinced, I think, by the arguments put forward by our planning officers that this sign wouldn't add anything to the area. In fact, it would provide visual clutter. And the argument that it doesn't relate to a business that's already there sort of wins me over. The other thing is I just happen to have a business card in my handbag, which happens to be a photo of Newmerella, and it just reminds me of what a beautiful rural environment it is. And although it's not of the main street, I have to say, but I think that an advertising sign such as we're considering in that area would be detrimental, and with the potential of further signs, I don't think I can't support the application.
But you do support the motion?
But I do support the motion.
Right, thank you. Okay, thank you. The recommendation, clarify. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go back to when the original proposal was before council. I went out there and spent a considerable amount of time looking at the block in question and the streets around it, the house behind it, the visual impact that would be from the highway, and I don't think it's got much merit. So I will support the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Allen. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak?
Yes, look, I really want to commend the officers for their position on this. However, I must say that I oppose their position purely on the fact that I'm just hopeful that we could add some positive messages into our community. Perhaps if this was to go ahead at VCAT and we did, for whatever reason, lose, maybe the applicant might put "We love our local council" as a sign, as a thank you sign. We live in a land of free messaging. I believe that people should have the right to be able to put up signs in appropriate commercial areas. I understand the arguments for and against, but I'll support the applicant in this particular motion.
Councillors, is Would anybody else like to speak for and against the motion? I'll just make a couple of comments, councillors. There is a precedent from VCAT, and that's supported by the officer's recommendation. I've been there and was part of that. It would be an eyesore, an additional eyesore. Newmerella is a place that is not trying to be 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. Newmerella is trying to be a town where people want to live and have amenity. And Vic Roads is about to invest a lot of money in the Newmerella Wayside Stop. Flat Bicky is a little business that operates there, a little wayside cafe. It doesn't want to be bombarded by those sorts of signs. It's not what Newmerella wants. It's not what the locals want. As has been mentioned, it's inconsistent with this planning scheme. It's not the type of commercial activity that they want in Newmerella. Once you put up a billboard like that, no other business will operate there. They actually want a business that contributes to that community, where a billboard is a static non-contributor to that community and the owners don't live here. All the revenue from that will go somewhere else, to Melbourne. That's where the money will go, not into the town, not like Flat Bicky, who sit there every day, make their money, and they live up the road. It's an incremental amenity loss. Once there's another sign, councillors, there'll be another one and another one. And that hideosity will continue. Just down the road, as you go down the cutting, there is a really beautiful sign that says, "Welcome to Snowy River Country," stone and wood, very rustic, and that's the sort of messaging. They're not going to put "Welcome to Orbost" on there for free. We've got the signage that actually welcomes us to that country, and this is not it. So, councillors, I really thank you for the words that have been spoken, but also I hope that you do support the officer's recommendation. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried 7-2. Thanks. Thank you, councillors, for your consideration. Councillors, we're on to 5.4.2, which is the position paper native timber harvesting in East Gippsland. Mr McConnell, is this you? It would be.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
This has been a love child of yours for a long time, and a lot of work that you've done.
I won't make further comment on that. Thank you, Mayor. So, as you suggested, this position paper has been the subject of considerable work. At the request of councillors, officers have worked with councillors to draft a position paper that makes clear what council's position is in relation to native timber harvesting in East Gippsland, and that paper's been prepared for consideration and adoption by council tonight. The draft position paper responds to the decision by the Victorian Government to phase out native timber harvesting by 2030, and also the implications of this for East Gippsland communities and businesses and the supply of forest products. In the work in preparing this position paper, councillors have sought to inform themselves of the issues associated with the phase out of native timber harvesting. And this has included visits to timber businesses, visits to coops to see how timber harvesting occurs, and also alternates to the current practices. It's also included presentations from forest managers, from environment groups, and from academics that have worked in the forest management area. Council also earlier commissioned with Wellington Shire Council a report to better understand the impacts in terms of economic and job impacts associated with the phasing out of native timber harvesting. So it's taken an extended period for this paper to be developed and to be presented to council, but that's been the result of careful consideration and seeking information to inform a position. So councillors, you have before you the draft position paper that sets out a position for council to adopt in relation to the future of the native timber harvesting, and to some extent also the future of our forests and communities in East Gippsland. So the recommendation is before you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there questions? Councillor Urey, then Councillor Buckley.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
Mr McConnell, is there any, if this position paper is adopted by council this evening, is there any problem with the timber encouragement policy, which is currently, I think that's what it's called, which is currently on council's books?
So, thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. I don't believe so. The timber encouragement policy is due for review in any case, but the position that is being proposed here is that there is an opportunity for a lower volume, high value timber industry, and the nature of many of the things in which council currently uses timber for would be supported by that type of native timber harvesting.
Councillor Erie, thank you. Councillor Buckley. You're on mute there, Sonia.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, sorry about that. Can you just briefly clarify for me some of the statistical information around that's been provided in this report, just perhaps so community could understand the importance of this industry in our region?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. I'll just go to the actual report so I can reference some of that information. So I think so probably the first thing to note in relation to that is that the native timber industry has been a significant part of East Gippsland for some time, and so not only is it associated with jobs and economic income within East Gippsland, it's also more broadly associated with the identity of many communities, and so I think we need to recognise that. As I indicated, we did some work with Wellington Shire Council to seek information about the impact on jobs, etc., that would occur with the phasing out of the native timber industry, and that information has been published on our website as part of that report. As part of this work, we did also seek some further updating of that information to indicate the sorts of numbers of jobs that might be associated with a phase out of native timber harvesting if that was to occur immediately, and the estimate of the number of jobs affected, direct jobs, would be just over 300 across the municipality. That said, that we also need to recognise that's in the absence of any other mitigating measures that are taken to support activities within East Gippsland. So I think it's very difficult, I think, to understand exactly the numbers of jobs and exactly the impact that might occur, but hopefully that figure gives you a sense of the sort of impact that this change will have on our economy and on our communities.
And the financial loss? What's the implication there?
Yeah, so similarly, there's been estimated a loss of about $99 million in terms of sales through East Gippsland. Now, there's other measures that can be used for economic impact that take into account other indirect effects, etc., and I don't have those available, but in terms of sales as a measure of direct impact, that's an estimate that was provided.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Stowe.
Stuart, you mentioned 300 direct jobs. It's generally agreed that if you've got 300 direct jobs, you'll have 300 indirect jobs as well. So the potential is, in fact, 600 jobs and possibly double the amount that we're talking about. Would that be fair?
So certainly a component of indirect jobs that are associated with any direct job losses. I think that's a fair comment. And again, those estimates are based on the assumption that businesses and other investment doesn't create other opportunities, and we do know that some businesses are looking to change their operations, diversify their business and so on to create other jobs and opportunities. But as a starting point, that gives as an indication of the scale of the impact, yes.
Thank you. And over the years, the timber industry and the workers have been involved in fire management and maintenance of roads even, and they're quite a lot of important jobs. Is there any indication of what will happen if we lose those people?
So I think it's an important, yeah, you're right. Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. You raise an important point about the role of the private sector workforce in terms of management of forest roads, etc., and also fire suppression. And that's been important over a number of years, but we saw that particularly during the 1920 Black Summer fires as well. So those responsibilities sit then with the Victorian Government. This is public land that would require management ongoing, and it will be the Victorian Government's responsibility to ensure those resources are available. There is some work that's being discussed about how the workforce can be used to help maintain forest roads and etc., which will continue to need to be provided. But there's still further details to come in terms of those opportunities coming.
That's unfunded at this stage and no promises made.
We are aware that that's something that's been flagged. I'm not aware of the details of how that's to be funded at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Stowe, thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillors, there is a recommendation there in front of us. Is there a motion? Councillor Crook. Councillor Greason, did you second that? Thank you. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, look, I will. And I will, I guess, because I'm a firm believer in native forest industries. In fact, I was elected on the basis that I'd support a forest industry or forest industries that we can all be proud of. But I also understand that the forest industry sector we have now has to change. I'm happy to move this motion tonight, not because I agree with everything in this policy, but because I believe it represents a compromised position and a way forward for our forests and for our communities. I could talk at length about the conservation values of the forests in East Gippsland and environmental vegetation classes and the merits of variable retention harvesting and the like, but I think that sort of misses the point to a large extent, and the details would be lost on a lot of people. So I'll just tell a bit of a story instead. If you drive through Newmerella, right next to where we were talking about that big sign just now, there's a little family-owned sawmill that's been there for about 50 years. It only employs 9 people, but for that little town, that's a significant amount. I would estimate, and I don't know, that mill takes about 5,000 tonnes of our forests a year, maybe even up to 10,000. I don't know the number, but point is it's not very much. Now, beyond 2025, it looks like that mill is now going to close. And it's going to close because the allocation of trees that it gets currently are going to be given to a wood chip mill in Maryvale in the Latrobe Valley. And it's a foreign-owned facility. And to put it in perspective, that wood chip mill has a guaranteed legislated supply through a thing we call the Wood Pulp Agreement Act that guarantees that foreign-owned wood chip giant 350,000 cubic metres of forest every single year. Fennings Mill up the road here, who you'd all be familiar with, for perspective, mills about 40,000 cubic metres. Not 350, 40. The biggest sawmill in Victoria, for comparison, Hayfield, biggest in terms of volume, biggest in terms of employment, over 100 jobs at Hayfield, it mills about 80,000. And yet, all our forests, very soon, will be going to that one foreign-owned wood chip giant in the Latrobe Valley. And I don't think that's good use of a resource. And I think it's a bit of a dirty secret that doesn't get talked about much by our local politicians, and it doesn't get talked much about by the industry. But the wood pulp agreement, it places all sorts of demands on our forest, and it's seen the industry become almost entirely incompatible over the years with the maintenance of other forest values. Threatened species, for example, honey production would be another one. This council paper of ours doesn't quite go into those details specifically, but it speaks in general terms about valuing our forests. And we recognise that the way forward for our forest industries is possible. And that way forward is about valuing and using our forests for the highest possible value. Low volume, high value. The industry we've got now, it has been turned on its head. It's about low volume and high value. And I don't believe that's in anyone's interest, really, unless you happen to be a foreign-owned wood chip giant in the Latrobe Valley. So I'm not pretending we have all the answers in this new council position paper, but I do believe it moves the dial in the right direction. And if the state government were to listen to all our concerns and adopt all our recommendations, I believe that our forests and our communities would be much better off. So I'm happy to move the motion tonight.
Councillor Crook, thank you. Councillor Greeson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Crook. I think the story you just told outlines just the complexity of this industry and what is actually happening in the real world out there. I'm voting for this paper. It represents a compromise position that's taken us a long time to achieve. We've been talking about this for ages, and we come from totally different perspectives across the councillor group. There are premises within the paper that I don't agree with at all, mainly that native forest logging continue, and that's given the IPCC's clear statement that deforestation is one of the 3 major causes of climate change. But also we've lost so much forest over time, and particularly in the Black Summer fires. What the paper does do is make it clear that the East Gippsland Shire Council does not support ongoing clear felling of the forests. It also recognises all of the values of the forests, including, economic development, future economic trades, biodiversity and recreational activities. And importantly, it advocates for those communities in East Gippsland that have taken their identity from their logging history and the people who will need support through transition out of current timber processing. So that's the reason I'm supporting the paper. Thank you.
Councillor Grecian, thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor White.
Thank you, Sally. Very, very short and perhaps pedantic, but just to correct something that Councillor Crook said, so as we can get the transcript correct. The last part that you spoke of about the pulpwood was high volume, low value. Just to get it correct.
Did you get that? Was that back to front, Tom? Was it?
My apologies.
Thank you, John. Councillor Stowe, Uri, Allen, Buckley.
I agree with a lot of what Councillor Crook said, and I'll support this paper also. I think we all agree it's compromised. We've got different views how, but let's be clear about that mill. The mill's closing because the government's reducing their volumes and they can't get timber. And the same thing happened at Fennings up here. The 30th of June came, and their allocation they were promised years ago, they couldn't even get phone calls returned from the government to indicate when the next lot would come through. And the mills are closing because they know that they're going to get no timber, and it's being closed down by the government.
Councillor Stowe. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also speak in support of this position paper. And I want to, other councillors have spoken about it, but I really want to focus on the process that we've been through in reaching this point. I really, really want to commend our officers, especially Mr McConnell, GM of Place and Community, for leading us through this process over 12 months, probably, I think, more or less. as we were seeking to increase our understanding of an industry which has been such a vital part of our history in East Gippsland, which is already very much changed and for which further change is absolutely imminent for many desirable and perhaps necessary reasons. I also would like to commend my fellow colleagues, my fellow councillors, for being willing to learn more about a subject which has many difficult aspects. I think we've all tried to really listen to a range of different views and perspectives, both from one another but also in the community as well. And while I have no doubt that our explorations and research could have been more extensive, I really appreciate this collaborative approach to decision making. As a councillor who is seeking a future where forests, rivers, people and wildlife all thrive, I am personally not fully in agreement with the position described in this paper. But I know that for different reasons other councillors will also be not fully in agreement. But I am happy that it's good enough for now and will be a sound tool for advocacy. It allows us to continue to be mindful of those people and places which will be most affected and to continue to advocate strongly for a just and fair transition. And it represents a step forward in recognising that our forests and precious remaining ecosystems, particularly in light of that bad and deteriorating state of our environment that we've been speaking about earlier in this actual meeting, need urgent protection and should be valued more than they currently are. As a whole, native timber harvesting is a huge and complex topic, and East Gippsland Shire Council are not responsible for many of the aspects. However, we do have a responsibility to advocate for our community. Again, appreciation to our staff, and I urge councillors to support this important piece of work. Thank you.
Councillor Uri. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mark. I will support this motion. You know, for some people, this is about trees, but for me, it's about people. Good, honest, hard-working people in the communities that they rely on to exist. The brutal fact of the current policy of the state government is that many of those who currently earn an honest living in the timber industry will, should this policy be implemented as planned, never ever work again. Their livelihoods, their reasons for existence will be taken from them. For many, there is no alternative employment. That's just the brutal facts. As I attend transition events, I hear of jobs, but you never hear of people. Yes, there may be some artificially created jobs, dependent on government funding, but they won't provide jobs for many of those who are displaced. What I'm concerned about is people, real people, not abstracts like jobs. I've yet to hear the Latrobe Valley Authority talk of people. They only ever talk of jobs. So let's acknowledge that this isn't about trees, it's about people. People forgotten, the very people who make up our communities.
Councillor Allen, thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Allen. I agree with your sentiments. The closure of our native timber industry will, let's face it, it will devastate our communities and their families. And we can ill afford to lose $99 million after the disaster of the Black Summer and COVID. It's important to advocate on behalf of our community to send a strong message to save the native timber industry. And as I have often reported as the councillor who sits on timber towns, I take this responsibility very seriously and I care for the many employed in what is a critical sector of our rural industry. Every councillor in this room should understand how it is to the towns that rely upon this industry, and I'm shocked by the lack of understanding of the state government and would hope that they would have a change of heart. The importance of a new approach to silviculture management provides healthy forests and improves forest health through the practice of best management practices. Now, I hoped for a stronger message in our position paper, and I fought for that. However, I respect that there are strong opposing views in this chamber. What is clear is that the Victorian Forestry Plan has serious implications for East Gippsland, and we can ill afford to lock up our native forests and, in effect, mismanage it. The decision to close the native timber industry will just encourage more wildfire and also leave country people extremely vulnerable when fire comes. The machinery that the industry has protects our communities and will not be available if the native timber industry is shut down. So, in closing, the community has clearly stated to me that the state government must reconsider this decision, and I ask all councillors to fight for this to happen. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Buckley, thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Allen wholeheartedly, but something that, and it's not in our remit, but we're talking about our region and our mills and our people, but the government needs to recognise that this has a global impact. By closing our forests, we are opening up rainforests throughout the world, which do not have the regulation that we have around harvesting timber. And what we will see then is an importation of timber that's come from, say, the Amazon jungle, which never gets to grow back. And I think it's having an environment. It will have a significant environmental effect globally, which will not be replenished because of no regulation. So they pull down a rainforest somewhere for logs and turn it into a cow paddock, and it doesn't grow back. So that's just another side to this. And I certainly am not losing sight of the fact that what we're talking about here is our position on the native timber industry. And but as I said, it has a far-reaching effect, more than just East Gippsland.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillors, I'll just like to say a couple of words, and again to echo what some of you have said in regard to the work that the officers have done in synthesising the input from everybody around the table. And that includes the input we've had from significant industry groups and user groups and interest groups. I think that we've cast the net quite wide to gain a broad perspective. And I think that this paper recognises that. You've heard me use the term, don't let perfect get in the way of good. This is really good. And it may not be perfect for each individual, but it's a really good place to be, to have a position that we can stand on. And in the words of a couple of the supporters of this paper who've already had some correspondence, you know, we love our forests. We love them for conservation. We love them as working forests as well. And they have treated us really well. And it's a very modified forest environment out there. We know that there are tens of thousands of heavily stocked regrowth forests that need to be managed. And if they're not managed through the recommendations that we have of a new silviculture, then we're going to be more and more vulnerable to fire. And that's going to be a threat to the people of our communities. But councillors, I really acknowledge the work that you've put into this and the patience and the respect that's been shown around the table in bringing this paper together. And I absolutely support it as well. And thank you all for it. Councillors, I'm going to ask you to put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillors, that's carried unanimously. Councillors, well done. Stuart? Councillors, we are moving on to urgent and other business, and there isn't any, so we're going to confidential business, and I will need a councillor to a motion, please, that we close the council meeting to the public in accordance with the provisions of section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider the following list of items, 7.1 and 7.2, as listed. Councillor Uri, a seconder. Councillor Crook, thank you. Do you want to speak to the motion? Councillor, is the motion opposed? Anybody else like to speak to the motion? I'll put the motion to the vote to close the meeting to the public. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. Councillors, thank you for being here tonight, once again for your diligent work and your deliberations. It was a long meeting and an important meeting. Once again, I want to thank the council officers for your excellent reports. As I've said before, and I'll say every time, that when you produce great reports for us that make us, that are accessible and able to be read so clearly, we can make good decisions. So thank you for doing that and your continued good work. Councillors, I'll declare the meeting closed at 9:06.